Welcome back to the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL. We are quad box on this Friday morning. We've got Tim Watts right there next to me, site publisher for BamaOnLine.com. Then we have senior recruiting analyst down there, the well hoodied one, Andrew Bone. Yeah, looking sharp this morning, Andrew. And then, of course, the prodigy of the bunch, Joseph Hastings down there, diagonal to yours truly. Good morning, guys. Sounds like we got a lot to talk about. What we'll do is we'll review and then we'll preview. We'll get into maybe the events of this last week in terms of visitors. There's been a litany, as we know. Tim, we'll start with you. Give me that one or two guys here that you think is most noteworthy in the last 6, 7 days. I'm thinking maybe quarterback, maybe linebacker, maybe even an offensive tackle in your mix.
It's Jackson Lloyd for me. That second visit coming back. Again, a guy Alabama was mentioned with very early in the process. There's like a handful of California guys that was mentioned to us: Josiah Sharman, Dejon Lee, Abdul Sanders. They're doing pretty good with those California guys connections they had. But obviously Jackson coming in, it's hard to get here. I mean, we were discussing this in our group text with Joseph and Andrew. I mean, the guy plays baseball, the guy plays basketball, the guy plays football. So getting time off to even travel across the world and to stay a couple of nights, get you 2+ days in with Tuscaloosa, get you to know Coach Cap and all that was a big one. Obviously, Matt Zollers was a big name because he was committing, but it kind of felt, it's hard to get real excited when he was committing on the 4th and just visiting Alabama on April 1st. So I guess the biggest thing we were watching was whether or not he would postpone his commitment, which he didn't. So it's kind of like, we barely got to know you, but that's two big names.
What about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think defensive back wise, Alabama had a couple of guys that they had not seen yet in person this week on campus. Shamari Earls out of Virginia was offered kind of early by Mo Linquist once he joined the staff. He was on campus, and then you also had Lagonzo Hayward out of Georgia, one of the top two-way athletes in the country, but recruited mainly as a safety, and he was on campus Wednesday and Thursday. So getting those two guys in Tuscaloosa, and you look at Alabama's defensive back class right now, only one, Zamir Smith. Out of the DMV area, so Alabama would love to go get some more guys out of the Maryland, DC, Virginia area in this class, because they've certainly been targeting that area. But those are two guys for me, especially Lagonzo Hayward, who's already scheduled an official visit to Alabama in June. Tennessee, certainly a top school for him. Florida State, Georgia also in the mix. So we're going to be watching Lagonzo Hayward pretty closely over these next couple months.
What about you, JoJo? Give us your name or two that struck a chord here in the last week or so.
Yeah, for me, it was Micah DeBose, out of Iger and Mobile, Alabama. Somebody that Alabama's previous staff knew a lot about, got on campus a ton last year, was able to return on Wednesday for the first time this year, meet the new coaching staff, specifically Chris Kapilovich, the offensive line coach. He got to see Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack back in January. There was a previous relationship there with Womack going back to his time at South Alabama. But, he's definitely one to watch just in terms of you're looking at offensive targets now. We've talked about the defensive guys, and Tim brought up Jackson Lloyd, and you see the Bows there. And, you're waiting for those offensive commitments to start rolling in, because right now it's just Anthony Rogers, who committed under the previous staff as the only offensive commit in this class. So, looking at that side of the ball, seeing which players Alabama's targeting and which ones they're going after. So, we had a great conversation with the Bows posted on BamaOnLine.com right now, which you can check out. But, we're looking at the offensive line targets and some of those skill position guys as well.
And so, Tim, as we move forward here, a big stretch continues, star-studded, one way to describe the last few days, and really today and heading into Saturday's scrimmage. Familiar name anyway, and Bo Jackson, a top 100 running back from St. Joseph's in Cleveland. No, not Vincent Bo Jackson from McAdory High School in Bessemer all those years ago. but a highly regarded running back. And then I also look at the line of scrimmage here on Friday and Saturday. Andrew Babalola, Justice Terry committed to USC currently, Antonio Coleman committed to Alabama. That's a good looking group making their way to the capstone.
Yeah, the staff, they've not only brought in a ton of talent, but they've spread it out fairly well. You know what I mean? It's not like no guys over 2 or 3 days and then there's 40 guys on campus. I mean, they're hitting on high cylinders. The one thing I like is they're getting guys back, revisits. So it's not just getting them on campus and then they're one and done. They come back for a visit. Obviously, Bo Jackson's a huge name, and a couple of my Auburn friends have given us a lot of trouble about him visiting this week. They've had a lot of funny things to say, obviously. But yeah, I mean, again, on the scrimmage, you get to the line of scrimmage, and Babalola is one of the best. Justice Harry, I mean, he's a guy that everybody and look, I think the guy is really, really likes the recruiting process, and I think it sounds like he's a people person because he relates to every staff that he talks to. So I think everyone feels like kind of in the ball game for at some point. Committed to Georgia, flipped to USC on a Sunday morning, kind of caught us, a lot of us off guard, coming back to Bama. So he's definitely a guy that we're watching. But yeah, I mean, they did a really good job of balancing, not just bringing in bulk, but balancing them throughout the week. And I think that's part of the reason we haven't had any kids say, like, I didn't get enough time, I didn't get to speak to the coach, or I didn't enjoy the trip.
Andrew, in terms of value and or need, and I guess Terry, when you think about his position, where he ranks among not only defensive linemen for the 2025 cycle, but overall with that group, which one or two of these guys, in your opinion, ranks at the top of that list that Alabama would like to land ultimately?
I think Justice Terry is certainly, one of those dudes. It's hard to find elite defensive linemen. Everybody, every single recruiting cycle, people get upset because you don't have 3 or 4 5-star defensive linemen in your recruiting class, and they just don't grow on trees like that. I mean, there's good defensive linemen out there. You got to develop them, but the upper echelon guys, there's really only about 3 to 5 of those guys every single cycle that are truly elite. They can step on the field almost immediately once they get on campus. And Justice Terry is certainly one of those guys. And he was committed to Georgia for over a year before he flipped to USC. And everybody thought that he was going to flip to, if he was going to flip, it was going to be to Alabama, because he named Alabama as his number 2 school back in February. But decided to flip to USC after taking that visit. And as Tim mentioned, he is he's a people person. He's taken a lot of visits this summer. Already has, I think, 4 official visits scheduled in June. So we'll see if Alabama is able to get an official visit out of him today when he takes that unofficial visit this weekend.
Joseph, we look at the running back position. I think it's intriguing for a couple of reasons, because Alabama has had a commitment at that spot for some time now. Do you think this is a 2 running back class as it shapes up? That's kind of been the MO, I think, for Alabama in the past, but where does Jackson kind of fit in with all of that?
Yeah, so, you've had the back-to-back classes there with signing 2 running backs. This past cycle, signing Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, the class before signing Richard Young, Justice Haynes. So, like you mentioned there's a little bit of a trend. And, looking at Bo Jackson, it's going to be interesting. He narrowed his recruitment down to 12 schools the other day. Alabama was in that group. So it seems like he's pretty far off from making a decision, only being at 12 schools. We're going to be paying attention to the visits, how things go on that front. But there's definitely interest here. He's been in communication with the coaching staff. Bone posted an article on him, after he received his offer in February. So, he mentioned the interest that he has in Alabama himself. So, that's one we're going to be paying attention to. And as for if this is going to be a 2 running back class or not, I think it's just going to, come down to how the dominoes fall and, where things end up going, evaluations, if any other prospects are added to the board. I think that's one thing that's important to note right now. Alabama's still in the evaluation phase. They have the evaluation period coming up. The spring evaluation period coming up starting in mid-April. There's also the possibility of summer camp offers, senior season offers, those late offers. We've seen a couple of those over, the past few years. So, I think it's a very fluid situation right now.
Tim, it sounds anyway as if Alabama's in pretty good shape with Jackson Lloyd. the outstanding offensive tackle prospect from Carmel, California. And if it works out that way, the only thing better than one elite offensive tackle in a class, as you know, is two. So talk to us about Andrew Babalola and where Alabama sits with him right now. I know the competition at this point is still particularly fierce.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that's going to be able to name his school right. I mean, top 20 in the country, has taken a lot of visits. I mean, he's been, especially locally, he's seen guys, seen Kansas State quite a few times actually. So a guy that could want to stay closer to home. Kansas might be a guy that factors in their team that factors in there at the end. We haven't heard as much about them. More Oklahoma, guys like that. Talent wise, I mean, I think the Bama staff would love to have a guy like that because you're fighting from tackles. It's all a fist fight, right? Anybody you get that's not a fist fight is absolutely gravy. I mean, you're eating your dessert before dinner, right? So the rest of them, David Sanders and these guys, are going to be massive battles, probably to the very end. We saw what happened last year with Jordan Seaton, the number one tackle in the country, and we know everything that goes with it. But from a talent standpoint, I mean, he's definitely the bookend you'd like to add. If you have Jackson Lloyd, hypothetically, he is the bookend you would like to add. Two guys. I think Charles Powers says Jackson 25th in the country. This Andrews probably top 15 or 20 in the country. I don't remember his ranking right off top, but I mean, you get two of those guys. I mean, I think you'd be pretty happy with that.
I guess, Andrew, one of the positives of accruing a growing list of commitments is that those guys come back too, which can help you in your recruiting effort. I see some of that for this weekend. And look, we're being real here. You got to keep recruiting those guys too. I mean, we've already seen with Antonio Coleman a little bit of a propensity to flip one way and then back to the other. So never over till it's over, even with your commitments.
You're right about that. We're starting to see more kids who, flip to schools and still take visits, more than ever before, it seems like. I mean, we just talked about Justice Terry. I mean, he committed to USC 3 weeks ago, and he's already scheduled 4 official visits. And now you have Antonio Coleman, who committed to Alabama during the fall, flipped in December to Auburn, and then flipped back to Alabama on March 2nd. Now he has he's saying he's going to start taking official visits this summer, and is named places like Miami and USC as places that he'd like to get out to. He's already been back to Auburn for an unofficial visit since the commitment to Alabama. So you got to recruit these guys all the way until the finish line, and it's not going to be easy. So Luke Metz is also going to be back in Tuscaloosa this weekend, out of Mill Creek High School over in Georgia. One of the top linebacker commitments in this class. This is a kid that is not going to take any more visits. He is shutting things down, though. He is a diehard Alabama fan. He is, really excited about being in this class. He's also, wanting to be one of those lead recruiters. So getting him on campus this weekend to help with some of these guys, definitely beneficial.
Andrew, we haven't spoken with you really since some of these commitments have rolled in the last couple of weeks. With that in mind, if you were going to pick one of these current Alabama commits that would be the best recruiter for Alabama from that perspective, knowing that you talk with all these guys, who would be your choice as the lead recruiter to this point of Alabama's commitments?
You talking about me or Joseph?
Joseph, I'm sorry.
Oh, I would say Daryl Duke Johnson. That's kind of the easy answer because you see him tweeting out at the top players in the country, trying to get them to Alabama. One of them being Lagonza Hayward, who visited Alabama on Wednesday, as Bone mentioned before. Duke Johnson, he's the highest rated commit in Alabama's class right now. That definitely holds some weight. He's also a top defender in the state of Georgia. There's plenty of talent in Georgia. We mentioned Justice Terry there too. Players that you can recruit in Georgia and surrounding states. He's somebody who's pretty active on social media. So you always kind of look at those guys in terms of being leaders of the class. I also think, like Bo mentioned there with Metz, he's very locked in with Alabama. Could be somebody who, when he gets on campus, is a star recruiter for the program. So I would look at those two, which is interesting, those being the out-of-state guys, in the state of Georgia. But just with the frequency with which they can get on campus, both are scheduled to visit Alabama this month. Metz this Saturday and Duke for the A-Day game. just the ability to return to campus frequently, how active, they've been, and, just that love for Alabama. I'd go with those two.
Afro Man Davis checking in here in the comments. We certainly encourage you to do the same. If you would like to make a comment or maybe submit a question for the guys as it relates to Alabama recruiting, you are certainly welcome to do that. We'd also like to remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel for BamaOnLine.com. If you haven't done that already, hit that subscribe button. Hit a like for us if you don't mind. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our YouTube content as it drops right here. So, Tim, we talk about that with Joseph in terms of commitments and the extent to which they can help you recruit. Kind of interesting too, because Alabama to this point doesn't have its 2025 quarterback committed. And you usually associate, right? Yeah. That position with that spot, the catalyst in a lot of ways. But I'd say without that and what we've seen from Alabama to this point, the prolific approach is made even more impressive.
Yeah, I think at some point you have to worry, though, about having players being the lead recruiters, because how many times Joseph and Andrew can certainly attest to, hey, he left the commitment group chat. You know what I mean? He might as well have tweeted a decommitment when old boy just leaves they have a text group just for the commitments of their school. When you're out of that one, you're out of the class. So we hear that a lot too. That's really some of the key things we hear to get this thing started. Quarterback, I feel like the dominoes fell so early. We talked about this before Kalen DeBoer got here. They had so many of the top quarterbacks were committed. They were kind of late. Honestly, I don't know if they'd say this publicly, but I think they want to see some of these guys throw a football, right? I mean, they've seen highlight tapes. Quarterback's a hard position to evaluate. You'd love to see him in spring, which is coming up, spring football for the high school prospects. You'd love to see him there. You'd love to see him at your camp, right? You definitely get some hands-on approach with some coaching. So quarterback position is probably going to be one of the most interesting. Now, I don't think it's pressing. Y'all might disagree. I don't think it's pressing that they've got to have a big-time quarterback in the 25 class because of the portal, the attractiveness of Kalen DeBoer. They've got a pretty good quarterback room when you compare it to the rest of the nation. I think a lot of schools would be happy to swap out, to have those four guys on campus. So it's definitely going to be interesting. I mean, obviously, as Sam said, update on Juju Lewis. Juju's taking visits. Juju's he's going to take visits. We're going to figure out the rest closer to signing day, I think. But he's definitely taking visits. I'd expect him to come back to Alabama. Just left USC. So still think committed, but pretty wide open. Is that a thing? Is that how
so. It is in 2024. It absolutely is, I think. And so I'm going to put you guys on the spot. If Alabama signed a quarterback today for the 2025 cycle, and understanding Matt Zoller, I don't think is listening to you guys, he impacted the board much at all. I mean, obviously, if he wants to visit, you have him come visit, but the expectation based on his timeline was that he really wasn't a factor with Alabama. Andrew, I'm going to start with you. If Alabama signed a quarterback today, who would that quarterback be?
Ooh. To be on the spot. Yeah, I do think that Alabama has a very realistic shot with Juju Lewis. I don't think it's going to be one of those situations where he flips anytime soon. I think it's going to be a December type deal. He might reopen things. He's going to take official visits during the summer. That's probably the guy that I'm watching closer than anybody else right now is Juju, because there's really not a lot of options that are out there now. Deuce Knight, we've talked about him before, but I think he's pretty solid with Notre Dame at this time. But if I had to choose one person, I'd probably lean with Juju. But we got some big upcoming weeks, upcoming months. As Tim mentioned, evaluation period. There could be somebody that emerges late and gets an offer in camp, and they really press hard for it. So we'll see.
Is that where you are, Joseph, in all this, or do you have a little different angle to it?
Yeah, I'm tempted just because of the connections there with Deuce Knight to, Kalen DeBoer, DeBoer coaching his brother, and, the success that, his brother had at Indiana. Tempted going with him. I did say a couple of years ago, I had Keon Keeley in my mock class, in April 2022. And Got some flack for that, because of, where he was with Notre Dame. He wasn't taking visits at the time really too much. He ended up in Alabama's class. I don't feel as confident on that front with Deuce Knight. So I would probably go, and say Juju is someone that they have a realistic shot with, kind of following along with Bone there, just in terms of his familiarity with the program, both before Kalen DeBoer arrived and after getting on campus a couple times in March. I think that was huge. But yeah, as I mentioned before, that spring evaluation period and, summer camps, Tim touched on that too, getting to see these guys throw in person, who could potentially become an option. That's something we're really paying attention to. So it could be somebody that hasn't even been offered yet by the staff.
Tim, is that where you sit? I know we kind of started this with you a little bit earlier, but you have that same sentiment?
Yeah, I think the quarterback, I don't think there's pressure. I think the biggest thing you want to do is you want to get the right one. I think that's the biggest thing, whether that's the portal, whether that's experience. I think it factors in what happens with your current quarterback class. You know what I mean? What you need if you got 4 guys staying, and this is all hypothetical. If you got 4 guys staying, you can sign a guy that's a little bit of a project, a red shirt, and work him in and build him up. If you need a guy to come in and create depth, if it's just Jalen standing in that open room like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you're probably going to get somebody with a little bit more experience. So obviously that we don't expect that to be the case, but I don't think they're worried about the wide receiver position. I don't think they're worried about offense at all, to be honest.
You got that transfer portal, as you said too, guys, to consider not only at the quarterback position, but we know too, various position of this 2024 version of the Crimson Tide could still be impacted heavily at a couple different spots by some portal movement coming up here in just a couple of weeks' time. Hey, Andrew, I wanted to ask you maybe if there's a position out there that we haven't talked about enough for this 2025 cycle as it relates to Alabama. Obviously, linebacker's been heavy of late. We anticipate the offensive line maybe picking up some steam in the not too distant future. But one area that maybe isn't viewed as particularly a need, but is one where you think Alabama could really end up doing some good things?
Well, I think linebacker. That's an area that they don't have anybody committed yet. I'm just kidding. They got 4 linebacker commitments. That's my Friday morning joke. I think wide receiver, certainly. You look at last year's class. Ryan Williams, Rico Scott, Mari Jefferson. I mean, really good, solid group of guys there at the receiver position. So what's Alabama going to do in this cycle, especially with Coach DeBoer, Jamarcus Shepard, Nick Sheridan? They're really going after a lot of guys. They don't have a wide receiver commitment just yet, but there's a lot of guys that are visiting, and they're going to have one kid on campus this weekend, Marcus Harris, this is going to be his second time visiting the Capstone since Coach DeBoer arrived in Tuscaloosa. And he's out of Mater Dei High School in California. Alabama already has one commitment from Mater Dei and Abdul Sanders. So, he's certainly a guy that we're going to be watching pretty closely. There's some other guys that have set official visits for the summer, including Travis Smith Jr. We're going to see some more officials get scheduled over the course of the next couple of weeks. One player that I am very intrigued about for this weekend is Tyler Williams. He's a 6'2", 195-pound receiver out of Florida, but he's originally from Birmingham. He's got about 25 offers. Georgia's one of them. He's going to Athens on Saturday for a visit. Doesn't have an offer from Alabama just yet, but that could change today. He's been talking to Jamarcus Shepard for the last month and a half. They've been talking heavily. So I think that we're going to see an offer to Tyler Williams happen possibly as early as today. So he's certainly somebody that we're going to be watching. But wide receiver is a position that I think a lot of eyes are on. Even though it's not necessarily a humongous need, I think it's an area that everybody's kind of watching just because of Coach DeBoer, this new offense, and getting some of their own flavor in for this class.
Joseph, as an extension of wide receiver, what about tight end? That's something we don't hear as much about. I guess the transfer portal continues to be an avenue that Alabama will explore there. Anything from that area that you could tell us about?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting with tight end. That was actually going to be the second position I highlighted after wide receiver, because I agree with everything that Bones said there. But looking at tight end, last cycle, technically it reflects that they signed 2 tight ends when in reality, Caleb Odom has made that move to wide receiver, practicing with the receivers. We'll see how things play out there. But,
and they brought in Cuevas. Yeah.
Exactly. Josh Cuevas, the Washington transfer there too. So, we're going to be paying attention to what could potentially happen in the transfer portal, what could happen in the 2025 class. They've offered, some of the top tight ends in the country, and Deshaun Brame and Lincoln Cure and, Andrew Olesh. Olesh and Brame visited Alabama back in March. I'll see if they get on campus again. Olesh recently mentioned about the possibility of taking an official visit to Alabama. There's also a couple who have visited Bama. Some of the higher rated tight ends who visited Bama this year, and Chase Lofton and Vander Plug, a couple guys from Nebraska and California that made their way out to Bama. So, interested to see which offers are extended there, how many they fill at the position in this cycle. But yeah, like you mentioned before, I think the transfer portal with some of these top positions, with Alabama being an attractive destination for offensive players, could be something to look at.
They also have a tight end on campus today, actually, Micah Jones out of Mississippi, who was offered last month out of Madison Central. He is a 6'5", 225-pound tight end that just came off a visit to LSU. LSU's pressing hard. The in-state schools, Ole Miss, Mississippi State are pressing hard. But this is his first visit with this new staff, so really intrigued to see how the visit goes today with Micah Jones, because that could be another tight end that we're going to be watching really closely this summer.
Tim, our guy Sam here in the comments, he's not playing around. He's getting specific with you. He wants to know, Tim, who is the next commitment for the Tide? Enough of all this, Tim. Who's popping next, man?
Yeah, I think it's low-hanging fruit for me to predict Jackson Lloyd, right?
I mean, that's your default on everything, guys.
Let me be honest. I was saying that in February.
Jackson Watts.
I'm sticking with my gun. Yeah. I think, he has a trip coming up to USC. The interest in Alabama is there. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Again, you're coming from the complete other side of the country when you're extremely busy. I know the family is on board with him coming to Alabama too. So, I mean, that's all the little boxes have checked. Offensive tackle, previous relationship, probably not taking a ton of more visits. We say that. And, of course, he'll schedule 5 officials while the tweet will go out. He scheduled 5 officials. So I would say Jackson Lloyd is a guy I'm definitely watching. I still think at some point a wide receiver, and not a specific one, could surprise us, because I think there's guys they're working, not focused on it. They like their young receivers, but I think there's a couple guys they'd like to have, and I think they know who they are.
Andrew, where do you fit in on that?
I'm gonna go Dawson Merritt. He is a outside linebacker out of Kansas. We've been recruiting Kansas pretty hard this recruiting cycle, which is kind of crazy. And all these guys are, it's not just these random guys. These are highly ranked kids. I mean, Andrew Babaloa visiting this weekend, 5-star recruit. Lincoln Cure, who Joseph just mentioned, one of the top tight ends in the country. Deshaun Brame, another elite tight end in the country that is. All these guys are out of Kansas. So Kansas is the spot to go this year, it seems. But Dawson Merritt out of Overland Park has already visited Alabama last month, has an official visit on April the 19th weekend. I think Alabama's in the driver's seat. They're recruiting him for that Wolf position. I know everybody's kind of freaking out. Oh, Alabama's got 4 linebacker commitments. They needed to look at other positions. They're still recruiting some linebackers, and Dawson Merritt certainly kind of fits that bill at the Wolf position. 6'3", about 220 pounds. I could easily see him being a part of this class because he absolutely loved the visit to Tuscaloosa a few weeks ago, and they're getting him back pretty quickly later this month.
Kalen DeBoer and this staff might be that weird kid who eats every single thing on their plate one at a time, like all the carrots, get the linebackers out of the way. Then I'll go to the peas and get me some wide receiver. It might be one of those weird kids. I think most of us mix it up.
So yeah, they don't like their food to touch, is what
they
you're
don't
saying.
They do not like, they just one at a time. I think maybe they're just eliminating positions as they go along, and they got rid of the linebackers early.
And it works.
Yeah. As long as you get them, it don't matter what the order is, right?
Joseph, you got a pick for us in that department?
I just want to say I was that weird kid. I would eat the carrots first and then the rice and then, go forward from there. I didn't want to mix it up too much.
Yeah, we already knew that, Joseph.
Joseph literally ate like that this morning, I bet.
Yeah.
He said I was. He's like, this morning,
I want the Fruit Loops in the bowl and then the milk on the side, and I'll drink it.
I'm a different person than I was. I'm a different person than I was this morning. I'm going to go with a surprise here. I'm going to go with Javion Hilson. You talked about the flip from, Antonio Coleman to, from Alabama to Auburn, then back to Alabama. Javion Hilson, the way he did his flips was out of the blue, so to speak, going to Florida State shortly after Nick Saban's retirement announcement. And then also how he committed to Alabama in the first place after winning a state championship, calling up Nick Saban, committing on the spot. So it seems like he very impressionable, could, a very good return visit to Alabama next week could be the one that, puts him over. We'll see. That's not an official prediction. I know people may clip this and say that I'm predicting that, but I think he could be a surprise one to watch.
Joseph just ready to get all the linebackers out of the way.
Yeah, Alabama's going to a 1-9-1 defense. I don't know if you guys heard
carrots. That. I mean, it does. The linebacker thing, I believe it obviously means they want to flip the room pretty quick, right? Inside backer hadn't been the strongest recruiting position in the last few classes either. So, I mean, it's been kind of thin there in overall numbers. I mean, I know they brought in 3 last year, but still with the new system, they're going to have to flip the roster to what they want. I mean, I know some of the guys get frustrated. We saw that with Matt Zollers. Why haven't they offered him? Why didn't they offer him? I mean, I think the staff's proven they kind of know. The thing with Zollers was if he had slowed his recruit, if he wants to be recruited by Alabama, he can be recruited by Alabama. So it's not like Bama shut the door. They're recruiting mostly committed guys anyways, right? So this just puts him in the line of the committed quarterbacks we like.
According to Bob, Tim, you and I won the red carpet today. He wants my hat and your hoodie. So,
So if he merged these pictures, that's what me and Travis's baby would look like.
Oh, geez. That's rough to think about.
Look at Joseph. Joseph's like, that breakfast is coming up.
Yeah, he can smell it. Hey, guys, anything else before we get out of here on a Friday? Anything else we need to know going into this weekend?
I mean, it's a great weekend. I mean, there's a lot of great recruits that are going to be on campus. We mentioned most of them. There's even more. Jarquez Carter, a defensive lineman out of Florida, is another kid that's going to be on campus today. Really looking forward to seeing kind of how his visit goes. Logan Powell is an offensive lineman. One thing about Logan Powell that I want to mention is he's been offered by Coach Chris Kapelovich 3 times. Once at Michigan State, once at Baylor, and now at Alabama. And he's going to be making a trip to Tuscaloosa this weekend, Friday and Saturday. 6'5", 285-pound lineman out of Arizona. Great relationship with Coach Cap. Really intrigued to see how his visit goes.
What do we need to know, Tim?
I think it's just business as usual. They've been really consistent with everything they've done week in and week out with visitors coming in and the reviews we're getting. Joseph getting good interviews with Andrew, and the nuggets we get have been pretty positive. It's not all positive. I mean, we've covered bad news, guys that, Jamie French never really, I don't think the staff's been in a lot of contact with him, and he hasn't shown a lot of interest in Alabama, Matt Zollers and stuff like that. So there's been bad news. But a lot of it, I think the majority of it's good considering, you're trying to set the tone. And again, it feels like a sprint. It feels like a 40-yard dash, but this is a marathon getting to December. So, I mean, again, the highs, the commitments are, again, commitment's just a word now where you still have to recruit them like we noted earlier. But I think as far as setting the table, they did as well as you could have expected.
So, Joseph, knowing that you do a great job for us and tracking down a lot of these guys, in terms of today and Saturday, who's that first reaction guy? And I know there's more than one, but Justice Terry, what can we look for from you on that front?
Yeah, we're going to be definitely working the phones, trying to get in touch with, all the prospects who visit Alabama this weekend. And I'm really interested to hear, obviously, we talked about Bo Jackson, hear what he has to say stepping foot on campus. just his reaction to everything, hearing about just, the intensity of the scrimmage, the energy levels there. That's something that continues to be brought up in all of these post-visit interviews. Interested to hear how things go from the scrimmage, and also just, just intel in general, just, hearing from the recruits' perspective, who they thought stood out. Bone wrote a story on James Simon, and he had a quote about, Ty Simpson, and, just giving his feedback on that. So, I talked with Michael DeBose on Wednesday, and he told me about how Tyler Booker was leading the practice, being a leader among the offensive line group. So it's those kind of tidbits that really stick out when talking to prospects, but also just hearing, interest level and if they plan on getting back for an official visit.
Yeah, if you go to the BOL homepage right now, man, there is a nice mix because, oh, by the way, as we know, the men's basketball team playing in a little hoops matchup on Saturday night out in Glendale, Arizona. So certainly a lot of Final Four coverage, a lot of spring practice coverage, and certainly from these guys, a ton of recruiting coverage right there at BamaOnLine.com. And again, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel here, we certainly hope you'll go ahead and do that. Hit that subscribe button, hit a like button for us as well. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our YouTube content as it drops right here on the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. As always, guys, great stuff. Great stuff with us at BOL and the Roundtable, our premium message board. That's the hot corner for everything Crimson Tide, really. So check that out as well. Thanks, guys.
See you, man.
Appreciate it.
See y'all later.
For Tim Watts, Andrew Bone, and Joseph Hastings, quad box of Crimson Tide talk on a Friday morning. Travis Reier, thanking you for joining us. And until next time, so long, everybody.